What's going on, everybody? I go by the name of Sincere, rap soul artist from Calgary, Alberta. Thanks for taking part in Music Calgary SoundOff Summit, digital series taking place online from Okinstasis in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Ghana, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region. For future events, make sure to follow Music Calgary on socials and sign up as a member on the website for more programming updates. Now the moment you have all been waiting for. Here to discuss the ins and outs of digital marketing, please welcome Stacey Kerslake, Devon McCurry, and Sarah Franczyk. Gang!
My name is Stacey Kerslake, and I will be moderating this discussion. Just a little bit of background about myself. I have worked in the music industry in Toronto for over 10 years. I started at Dynalone Records and then moved to Warner Music, and then ended my time in the major label system at Universal. And I worked with a lot of artists, including Shawn Mendes, Billie Eilish, Halsey, Imagine Dragons, Katy Perry, and I specialized in frontline marketing, working with the big AAA artists and doing their digital marketing and out-of-home marketing for the Canadian territory. And currently I'm running and doing my own freelance marketing under Owned Marketing, where I work with independent Canadian artists as well as international artists, doing their digital marketing, out-of-home marketing, creative strategy, and that kind of thing. So really excited to be a part of this discussion, and I'll throw it over to Sarah for her introduction.
Hi, yeah, thank you for that. So my name is Sarah. As I just mentioned, I'm the founder of ZYK Marketing outside of, or in Toronto as well. Basically we work with independent artists and labels, both in Canada and internationally, on digital marketing strategies for social media platforms, digital advertising, as well as playlisting campaigns and radio promotion. So my background specifically is in the digital realm, both in music and outside of music in different industries. But specifically came to Toronto after working in the UK for a few artist management companies. Came to Toronto and worked for Dale Peters of Dale Speaking, doing radio promotion, and then found myself starting my own company in this great industry. So really happy to be here and be chatting with you guys, and looking forward to it.
Awesome. And Devon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet you both. Mine's going to be a little bit quicker, I think. But, yeah, I just working with Cadence Music Group. I'm the marketing rep. I've been Cadence for probably about 4 years now. Started off as an intern and then slid into the current role, or the previous role, and sort of progressed from there. But prior to that, was working some odd jobs, was touring a little bit, and sort of switched over to this side of things. But working with a variety of artists on the sort of like developing side of things, as well as some of the more established artists at this point. But that's pretty much the gist of it on my front.
Perfect. Well, today we're talking about digital marketing, and we're going to touch on different facets of the music industry, and specifically about how artists can learn more about digital marketing, what kind of tools and resources there are, but also just what it takes to create a very strategic marketing plan. So we'll get right to it. So when we're looking big picture at digital marketing, when it comes to either of you being presented with a new artist, what are the first things that you look for, ask for, or look to get access to before sitting down and making your marketing plan?
Should I start? Should I go for it? So for if any new artist or client comes to me, I think the overall kind of introduction and beginning is really understanding what are our goals, where are the growth opportunities, what is not just the short-term plan, but what's the long-term plan? What do releases look like throughout the rest of the year? And what are we really trying to build? Where are the artist's strengths? Where are the weaknesses? Again, kind of a little bit of a SWOT analysis can be helpful. But really, it is actually really helpful, is looking at where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, where those opportunities are, and kind of building the overall framework there to then start really diving deep into some of the analytics that they currently have on streaming services and social media platforms. But yeah, I think overall it's just figuring out what the artist's goals are, what are our focuses, and the opportunities for the digital realm there.
Perfect. And Devon, do you have anything to add there?
I mean, like really just echoing what Sarah said. They were just listening to the music first off and seeing what they've released in the past. Again, looking at the analytical side of things, just in terms of streaming stats, playlisting history, if it's available to us, and then their social presence across the board. They've got everything sort of reserved, even if they're not necessarily active on that platform, if they have the handle reserved in advance, just to make sure it's kind of covered on that front, right? And then also the sort of the consistency on that front, and their voice, their aesthetic. Again, going to the metrics, that side of thing as well, just to see what we can gather in terms of what we might be able to target going down that road in terms of advertising that stuff. Press history as well, the team that's involved with the artist, whether they have any management or booking agent, that side of things is always helpful. And to go along with that, touring history, anything like that. And yeah, we've already touched on it, analytics and that stuff, but it's invaluable on this front, especially when we're working with somebody very fresh, right?
Perfect. And just kind of riffing here, but when an artist comes to you, do you usually recommend that they get on every platform, or how do you determine what platform that they should be on? I know that's a question that I get asked a lot, so I'm curious what kind of advice you have for artists or even people looking to get into the industry and where they should start when it comes to social media.
Sure.
Well, in my perspective, I don't feel that artists need to be active on every single platform available. I think it's better to put a focus on specific platforms. I do feel though that Instagram, Facebook, YouTube are some core platforms to make sure that you are active on and building an audience on. Obviously, there's TikTok, there's Twitch, there's Twitter. There's a lot of opportunities to build an audience on different platforms as well. I think again, this is where just diving into the analytics, where what are the demos, what are the audience targets that we're aiming for, and then looking to kind of define those targets on different platforms that we would deem relevant for that artist, but definitely kind of a focus on a few platforms at first, if the artist is fresh, just to make sure we don't spread ourselves too thin.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Just leaning into the demo that you're targeting, where they're active. Try your best to get onto those platforms as well.
Mm-hmm. Because it can be very overwhelming for artists, right? When they think that, I've seen this person on Twitch or I've seen this person on TikTok do this, should I be doing that? So it's really important to look at where their strengths are, but also where a potential audience is as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And we're talking about like making sure, I'm sure we'll touch on it later on, but just making sure our content's relatively unique, depending on, whichever one you're presenting on. It's like the further you go down that path, the less unique some of your stuff's going to be, right? So
absolutely. And that actually is a great segue into my next question. It's 2021. We all have cell phones. And interestingly enough, the average person spends about 3 hours a day on social media, just scrolling. So how does this impact your digital marketing strategy? And how do you, determine in your plan how to capture the attention of people when they're just scrolling all day long?
Devon, you let me know if you want to go first one of these times.
I'm happy with the flow, whatever works, right?
Okay, all good. Well, for me, as you mentioned, there's a lot of screen time going on, especially now, a lot of video being watched, especially now. For me, when working with a client, it really is kind of a combination and a relationship between content strategy, creating, relevant, value-driven content that also is, is engaging or that inspires engagement, to keep people on your post or on your profile as long as possible, in tandem with digital advertising, because we all know with Facebook, Instagram specifically, the organic reach and algorithm, it has been decreasing, for a while. Facebook is a very low organic reach on a page, so it's finding the balance between the content and also the advertising strategy to make sure that you are delivering great content, but also reaching an audience that you want to reach / that you need to reach to be able to build even more numbers past that, right? So so those are kind of the two in combination that we really focus on.
Perfect.
Yeah, just to build off that, I guess, like realistically going back to the idea of planning in advance, and I guess with the content specifically, making sure when we're touching on the ads and just really in general is making sure that you're optimizing those so that they're actually set ratio wise for mobile, right? Because sometimes you end up seeing some ads that they just cut off, and some of the overlays may not necessarily be fully visible or whatever, right? But yeah, and then on the other front too, just like analyzing to see when your fans are most active, and sort of planning around that as well. We already kind of touched on it, but the cross promotion and unique content for each platform is one of those things too. And then monitoring trends as well, and making sure that when you do hop on trends, that they're applicable to you and you're not just sort of like stretching with something and trying to make it fit what you're doing. If it lands, it'll make sense and it'll come off as a cleaner, more feasible connection to what you're doing or whatever, right? So yeah.
And Devon, you bring up a good point in terms of working with artists when it comes to content and those moments that are really kind of blowing up. I mean, TikTok, it's so evident there with the dances and the trends and challenges that happen there. But I wonder if you have any kind of further advice or insight into an artist and wanting to capitalize on those moments, but also not straying far from your strategy in terms of marketing and advertising. I know I've experienced that in the past, so I'm just curious if you have any kind of insight for that.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to TikTok, it's kind of an interesting one because some of the stuff we're working on right now, it seems as though anything music related is a little bit tougher to draw people in with. And you're sort of balancing that out with the lifestyle side of things. And for whatever reason, it depends on what's going on, right? But it seems to be drawing in more of an audience, and the views and the overall engagement seems a little higher on that front. But with that in mind, I guess it's just sort of like finding ways to make sure that you still are mixing in that music content, because realistically, there's a bit of a trickle effect happening there. So when people do end up landing on your feed, regardless of the platform, right, they'll manage to sort of scroll through and take a look and see that, okay, you've got other things going on. You're recording artists, that side of things is happening there. Yeah. And I mean, realistically, the other thing that we've been trying to do lately is potentially even just tossing some of your originals, like again, back to TikTok, tossing your original sounds in the background of some of those lifestyle videos. It's sort of like it's not sneaky, but just like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like a way to slide that in there.
Yeah.
Even if it's not necessarily specifically focused in on your track and music in general, right?
And Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I think those are all really great points. With like just content on TikTok specifically, because that is a question that I get a lot. I'm sure we all get asked that quite a lot now that TikTok is just such a an influencer in music, but also culture and whatnot. So what I find with TikTok is there definitely needs to be a mix of music related content, but also more kind of lifestyle or more generic content that people can be introduced to you through. Whether I don't know, I've seen artists do some really cool things like do like make over their favorite pair of jeans or glitter up their guitar or something like that, where they're wearing this outfit to a photo shoot, or they're gonna they're gonna use this guitar that they've totally redone and bejeweled or whatever it is, So you can have fun with the content outside of just the music portion,
Mhm.
where you're just doing an acoustic live performance or whatever it is, because those can get a little bit old after a while. But really, I think it's just have fun with the content, because some of the content on TikTok is going to be can be planned and part of the strategy with the team for sure, and some of it is just spontaneous, where
Mhm.
something happens and you just like it just feels right and it's fun. And typically, I find that type of content is the one that that does the best,
Mhm.
has the farthest reach, because it feels authentic and people know that you're having fun with it. So, just from my personal experience there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you actually answered my question about TikTok and some best practices there. But Devon, did you have anything else to add?
Just relating it back to some of the other platforms, I think it's kind of helpful to take advantage of some of the built-in features that they do have in terms of like the interaction, that side of things. Realistically, with like Instagram, it's great to be using the sort of like polls and the quizzing and just like that kind of thing, right? Taking
Mhm.
advantage of those features to just encourage interaction, and then on a sort of like a simpler level, just making sure that you're responding to DMs and comments that are, coming across the board on your posts, whatever the case may be, or your stories or whatever, right? Yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to add on that front, really.
And I just wanted to elaborate a little bit further on something that Sarah said about authenticity. I think, in my experience, it's been a very difficult thing just in certain scenarios about having an artist and them feeling the pressure to kind of be something that maybe they're not. And I'm just curious what your kind of insight into authenticity and how it helps the marketing side of any project, and what your advice is for artists or even people managing or working with artists when it comes to authenticity and marketing.
Mhm. Well, I think from usually what you see with a video that goes viral or content that does really well, there's usually some type of value that people are getting through the content, whether they're being inspired or it's educational, or there are different types of value that people can get from content. So if there's something like that to kind of pull people in, and it's authentic to the artist, for example, they're providing information about their songwriting experience with a specific song, or there's some behind the scenes content that kind of showcases maybe some fun moments or whatnot, that can really be really connect people. And outside of the value kind of driven content, content that creates emotion, that makes people feel something, whether it's happiness or awe or whatever, that's a great way to showcase the artist, but also be authentic in providing that kind of the behind the scenes or that honesty through the content. So definitely you want to make people feel something. You want to make people kind of connect with you on a certain level. And that's where artists need to figure out how much they want to show of themselves, what I think we've kind of talked about this before, what their voice and their tone is, the personality that they showcase on their social media, because that can be a very, very important driver in terms of how people connect with them. And that's sometimes a little bit difficult for a band, for example, when you have multiple people in a band, like what kind of voice are you using, what's the tone, what's the personality. So it's important for individual artists, but also bands to figure out what how they're speaking to their audience, how they're connecting through the content, and also just showing the potential challenges of being a musician, but also the great rewards, and again, kind of just showing their authentic self through that.
Perfect. And Devon, anything to add there?
I mean, just again, building off that, I think it's sort of a situation going back to the relatability and all that sort of stuff. Right? It's like, I think sometimes with newer artists, it's I think you already mentioned it, but like comfort level in terms of self-promotion and that side of things, it's almost a little bit more helpful and easier for some to lean in on the sort of the behind the scenes type stuff and the personal side of things, because it feels less like promotion, more or less, right? And so you kind of start with that, share some of that behind the scenes and the story behind the tracks, all that sort of stuff, right? And then just slowly but surely build up your comfort level to the point where, you know, when it comes time to actually be pushing things and, you know, you're hitting a release cycle or whatever, right? It feels less like you're selling and more like you're just speaking to an audience that's ready for it, you know?
Right. Great. And this is a nice segue into influencer marketing. It's something that, you know, is a trend everywhere. And, you know, with the emergence of micro influencers, especially on platforms like TikTok, I think when a lot of people hear influencer, they think big money, big deals, and it can be really intimidating, especially for anyone breaking into the industry. So I'm curious of what your thoughts are on the influencer world and how it has disrupted the digital marketing world in a sense, but also helping it. And just some insight into that micro influencer world and how it could help some smaller artists as they're coming up. Devon, why don't you lead this one?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you kind of touched on it already, but price points are always pretty steep on this front.
Mm-hmm.
Even when, like, depending on your budget, right? Even some of the micro influencers
Mm-hmm.
are still asking for a decent chunk. And if you don't necessarily have a lot to be spending, it's not necessarily something I would lean into, really, to be honest with you, just because there's no guaranteed results there. I mean, it's tough to get results out of anything, but on that front, it's just kind of one of those things where it's almost sometimes when these campaigns run, it's more so about the influencer themselves and less so about the content they're pushing, depending on exactly what kind of level of involvement you have in terms of the creative that they're pushing alongside, right? But yeah, just on the other side of things, honestly, just like looking within your own network is always super helpful, right? And this is where, I mean, networking comes into play in a huge way, right? But yeah, just thinking about it in terms of the micro level, not necessarily just like influencers in the traditional sense, but even just like your peers and your friends, your extended family and all that sort of stuff. If they're sharing your content, there's that ripple effect there still. And if you're working with co-writers or producers or anything like that, I mean, that extends it even further, right? Because it's sort of like you're talking to a niche audience, so to speak, right?
Right.
There are some sort of affordable options out there. I haven't really necessarily messed with it too much, but Submit Hub was looking at that recently, and I don't know how new it is, but they essentially allow you to pitch to influencers on, I think it depends on the person you're sort of targeting, but they do both TikTok and Instagram, but it's based on that token system that they have, right? So I think it's like a bucket token or something. Again, no guaranteed results. You're literally just pitching to them, right? But it's sort of like it's an entry point, I guess, so to speak, beyond really just slipping into DMs and doing it that way and relying on your closer network to push things out.
Right. And Sarah, anything to add?
Yeah, and those are all great points and definitely something that I would recommend too. Everything just said. From what I've seen on some TikTok influencer campaigns for artists just starting out, it kind of like what Devon said, it doesn't seem to be so worth it in the beginning with that kind of associated cost. One of my clients decided to do a playlist push TikTok campaign, and really at the end he didn't see any results from it. Like, it just didn't go where he wanted it to go. And also, you don't really know through some of those pitching services, you don't really know who is going to be pitched, and you don't have a lot of control over like the audience and the target audience, even like internationally where it's going to be shown, and who's going to be connecting with the content and maybe potentially doing their own versions. Anyway, so I totally agree that I think it's really good to make sure you're using social media as a networking opportunity. Reach out to people, engage, get people excited about your content so that they share it, whether it's friends, family, and people, acquaintances, whoever it is. And in the future potentially, or wherever stage an artist is at, if there's a need, or not a need, but an opportunity for some type of influencer campaign for a song, it at that point is probably the best option. I would recommend to work with a company that does this on an ongoing and regular basis that has these connections. But at that point, you're going to have to make sure you have a budget for that type of campaign, right? So yeah, and I think actually just the first step is really trying to figure out, what part of my song is potentially TikTokable and replicable, yes, and but also, what is this potential trend that you can get people to copy and get influencers to make something exciting out of. So I think that's the first step, really the strategy behind that, and then going, okay, is this now an opportunity to hire a team or look for potential micro influencers either on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is to kind of share and help out and create this challenge. So I think there needs to be more thought in that first strategy portion than just going like, yeah, let's just try a TikTok influencer campaign. So yeah.
And I think that's where marketing can feel very overwhelming for a lot of people, regardless of what industry you're in, because there are so many platforms and there's so many opportunities. And so I think when, people hear these buzzwords, they immediately jump at it and say like, I need to do that. Where going back to your point of, you have to have your goal, you have to understand what the goal is and then from there plot out how you're going to get there. And the reality is too, I mean, what you do for one artist, you're likely not going to do for another artist, especially if they're vastly different in a different genre. It works all very differently, right? So yeah, some great points there. So Devon, I want to get your take on algorithms, another mysterious word when it comes to marketing, digital marketing, and what that means. I'm sure we've all had artists come to us and just say, how do I grow my following? How do I beat the algorithm? How do I get people to see my content and my posts? So curious if you have any insight on that.
I think just going back to the point around interactivity and making sure that these are again sort of like general terms, but it's kind of helpful to keep those in mind when we're talking about the content that we are creating. But yeah, just in terms of beating the algorithm and all that sort of stuff, it's one of those things. It seems to me as though they update the algorithms across the board frequently enough where you almost can't necessarily keep up with it. But yeah, I think just with that in mind, just keeping some core tenets in mind, and then again goes back to the idea of keeping things interactive and I guess mixing up your content and keeping an eye on your analytical side of things to make sure that if something is working, whether it be, we're always leaning in on the video side of content, obviously, right? But if for whatever reason we have an image-based campaign or some sort of static image that's gone up or across the board and it just seems to be reacting relatively well, there's no reason for you to not take advantage of that, right? But yeah, and going back to the resources that you have available to you in terms of just like the things that the social platforms themselves are posting related back to best practices and that stuff, right? It's like, I can't remember the exact order of precedence. Instagram is just sort of released in terms of what will sort of like boost you up on the algorithm, but it's like the savability and all that sort of stuff. But again, like I said, it all kind of goes back to the idea of exactly what kind of content you're tossing out there and how people are interacting with it and just sort of leaning on that front, right?
And Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I think basically content and engagement, those two together are what really needs to be focused on to say, quotations, beat the algorithm. You want to make sure that the content is quality over quantity, for example. Like I think it's better to make sure that you're putting together good content on less frequent kind of posting basis than just throwing a bunch of content out there. And then making sure that, again, that content is engaging people, because the more engagement you can build on that post, the better your discovery and reach is, and that's how you can build more potential new fans and reaching new audiences. So yeah, I think it's just as simple as be mindful of your content and be social. A lot of people forget to even reply to comments on their posts, and I think that is really detrimental to to the potential reach of these posts, especially within kind of the first hour or two of the post's life.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Really important to make sure you're getting back to people that you're having a conversation on DMs or Messenger, whatever it is. Inspiring people to save the post, as Devon said, or share. So all of those metrics, super important to focus on, rather than trying to like beat this algorithm. I think it's just
right.
Put the focus on those two.
Right. And we talked a little bit about video, and I might be aging myself here, but the days of much music countdowns and waiting for a video premiere on TV are lost and gone now. And so with so much of the internet's content being video based, how do you think official music videos are relevant? And for newer artists that might not have a big budget, how can they utilize some platforms like IGTV to help elevate their look and also share some of this content? So it's kind of a two-pronged question. Mm-hmm. Is it relevant nowadays? And also, what other kind of more accessible routes can artists take in putting their video out there?
Mm-hmm. I personally think you don't need to have a full-blown music video for every mm-hmm. release, especially independent artists that have smaller budgets. There's opportunity to create different types of videos, whether mm-hmm. that's like a live performance or an acoustic, or potentially filming some content on your phone and using that as a fun little music video of sorts, or promo mm-hmm. video, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be the typical music video, large production type thing anymore. Especially nowadays, it's been hard to get people together or get mm-hmm. video content together. So I've been seeing a lot of really cool and really creative takes on what a traditional music video is. So so I think having video content associated with your release or your single is, I would say, important, especially mm-hmm. nowadays, for your content, for discoverability, for that just visual, and keeping people or getting people aware of your music and your brand. But it doesn't have to be a traditional music video. There are opportunities to explore outside of that specifically. I find YouTube premieres are great mm-hmm. to promote new videos, and they have new options like the trailer that you can put in front. You can go live on YouTube. So there's opportunities to use some of those new aspects. Also, IGTV. And also just promoting your any new videos on socials to lead to YouTube, mm-hmm. To build numbers and subscribers there. I think that's quite important. And then maybe using IGTV as a way to continue the engagement and awareness and growth of the video potentially later on after you've released to YouTube. But there are different strategies out there, obviously, mm-hmm. In different opportunities. Right. So I think it's just looking at your calendar and how you're releasing and what opportunities you want to take advantage of.
Right. And Devon, any additional thoughts?
I think the video content side of things, especially if we're talking about YouTube, is crucial, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional music video we're all accustomed to, I guess, right? Just like I think the discoverability on YouTube is huge, right? And so mm-hmm. as long as you're on there and the content that you are posting, as long as you're satisfied with it, just make sure it's up to snuff in terms of your own personal standards. That's great. Just like affordable options too, right? We're talking about lyric video stuff based on found mm-hmm. footage with the Creative Commons license. If you can afford to do any sort of subscription-based stuff on the video front with some more of that found footage stuff, and literally just making sure it's sort of branded on your front, that's great. And I guess the other thing to think about here too is just on the granting side of things. I'm not sure exactly how it works depending on the province and the granting body, but I'm assuming there's some very specific video-related grants that you can lean in on that front. And then, I mean, when it comes down to actually creating your own content, I guess if you can also afford to sort of like polish it up a bit with a decent mic or a camera or something along those lines, just to elevate it to the point. It's, especially if we're talking about your own personal standards in terms of what you're comfortable with putting out there, right? Mm-hmm. That's something to keep in mind there too. And just like going back to the the discoverability and all that side of things is just sort of the user generated type playlist options that are available, and the pitching that happens on YouTube in general, right? A lot of them are just asking for some sort of video content, and then it goes back to the press side of things too, with YouTube links, whether you know what I'm saying. But then on your point, like to your point about the YouTube premieres and all that sort of stuff, right? With full production videos and all that sort of things, it's almost like an event in and of itself now with the premieres, right? And the option to go in and chat with people prior to it's it can be a real like something to look forward to and really hype up in advance, especially if you've already got your subscriber base up there and all that sort of stuff, right? But yeah.
Perfect. And I want to touch on streaming. It's obviously such a huge part of the music industry. And also, I personally think that streaming and marketing go hand in hand. It's very difficult to do one without the other, and having a proper strategy on both sides. And obviously, this past year has been very different in terms of people's consumption patterns and how they're listening to music. But also, last month, Spotify released some really staggering stats that can be a bit intimidating, in the fact that there's 60,000 songs are uploaded to the platform every single day, which equates to a song being uploaded every 1.4 seconds. So with such volume, and also it being so easy where anyone can record a song at home and upload it to Spotify, what kind of approach do you take with a new artist and getting them exposed to this world that can be really daunting and really intimidating? But also, how do you adopt certain strategies to have them stand out in that world, especially when there's only one New Music Friday playlist and only X amount of artists can go on it every week?
Yeah,
it's a big question. We're covering a lot of ground there.
For playlisting specifically, and with newer developing artists, and when we're talking editorial playlisting, for example, I don't think there's you can't expect to get something. It's one of those nice surprises / something that you plan for. Obviously, there's the Spotify submission tool. Depending who you work with, your representatives or whoever might have relationships with some of these editorial staff members, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon here in Canada. So obviously, you can pitch in advance as well. That's something that I was going to mention first. You want to make sure you have time to prep for the releases coming up, and for different timelines, different artists, it might look different, but you want to make sure you give yourself enough time to pitch to some of these editorials beforehand. But again, it's never a given. So what I definitely recommend for streaming for independent artists is to really focus on the strategy for independent Spotify playlisting, as well as building say specifically Spotify followers. If we're going to focus on Spotify, let's say, building Spotify followers, building those active engagements on the platform, like song saves, repeat listens, listener data, so that you can then really build towards growing your algorithmic playlisting, which is going to help kind of push everything forward. So for my clients, what we do is we make sure, obviously, we are pitching for editorial, but again, nothing's given. We're putting a plan in place and doing research, and whatever playlist we are looking at pitching through, genres, relevant genres, moods, themes. We are prepping beforehand, and then making sure pitches go out in good time to build independent Spotify playlists, and also look at building Spotify followers and metrics through, say, digital advertising opportunities. So a bit of a combination of both, but yeah, giving yourself enough time to prep, because I've seen it many times where artists release songs and release some really good tracks, and then they've lost the opportunity to potentially pitch some of the editorials and maybe some of the New Music Friday type playlists.
Right.
So I think planning is everything, and
it is, yeah. And Devon, anything to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you touched on a lot of the stuff, right? Just like in terms of the daunting number of like 60,000 songs being uploaded every day, it's kind of try not to get bogged down by that too much. It kind of is what it is at this point, and I'm sure the number will continue to grow. But yeah, I mean, back to your point about just making sure you're planning in advance. I mean, we're lucky enough to have a team that we're working with that does an unreal job with the pitching to editorial playlists and all that sort of stuff, right? But on the user generated front, there's plenty of opportunities there. Just in terms of updating things on your DSPs in general, your profiles, keeping those up to date, making sure that you have those specific things that each DSP is looking for in terms of the features that they make available to you, like whether it be the your own playlist, your complete collection type catalog, or what you're listening to of late. Yeah, and if you have the opportunity to put together some exclusive content, whether it be, again, I mean, I guess with the Spotify side of things, just sort of like the essentials playlist for that side, or just like making one of your videos exclusively available on Apple, depending on what type of video it is. Yeah, I mean, some of the other DSPs offer some exclusives in terms of like the singles opportunities. I don't know if that's necessarily a thing up here in Canada yet, but yeah, I mean, outside of that, you also mentioned the idea of basically just leaning in on the advertising side of things with digital ads, making sure you're targeting all DSPs across the board with individualized, unique content branded for just one DSP as opposed to all of them, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Perfect. And I have one question left, and it's a bit of a doozy, but obviously this past year has been something that we can't plan for. And as marketing professionals, we love to plan. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, how COVID and the pandemic has disrupted the marketing world in both a good and bad way, if you have any insights.
Well, I know from my side of things, and just looking at my business in general, the amount of work that I am doing in the digital advertising space now compared to pre-COVID it's just completely different. I'm probably doing double that amount of work that I was doing before in digital advertising. So, it's that obviously is a way to reach audiences that you can't reach organically, a way to build audiences when you can't tour. Obviously, you can't perform live, but you can still show up in front of their feeds. A lot of people obviously spending so much time on their phones and devices. So that has definitely shifted my work specifically, and some of the plans and marketing plans and strategies that I use and that we use. But overall, I think that there's, with the live side of things, the live streaming side of things, there's some really, really cool opportunities for musicians on Twitch now, taking advantage of that and the relationship with Amazon. Yeah, I think there's just opportunity to explore some of those new avenues, new paid avenues as well, using services potentially like Patreon or other sites that allow you to build some income while also providing exclusive content or content that you can't get on social media platforms, for example. So I think it's made artists specifically look for new alternatives, look for new streaming and income streaming and revenue generators, which is great. I think it's great that it's been pushing the industry in that direction where artists are now getting paid more for their work online than they were before. So I think that's a positive for sure. But yeah, I think it's really putting a focus on social media and digital advertising in this certain environment that where maybe artists were not as focused before. They are now looking at focusing in those areas. So some positives, obviously, and just some changes, some evolutions that needed to be made.
Right. And Devon, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just going into it, I think from the get-go, it really disrupted everybody's touring plans for sure. Specifically, I mean, more so for artists, but at the same time, there's plenty of marketing opportunities around touring for us, pushing tracks and product and new markets and the discovery factor on that front. Yeah, but on the other side of things, to your point, there's been plenty of other opportunities that have popped up as a result of that through those other platforms. Specifically, like Twitch has been, I think, one that people have been gravitating towards more than others, just because of, it just seems to be an entertainment friendly platform in a sense. It just like, I didn't even realize it until relatively recently that, certain viewers, or sorry, I guess broadcasters can literally, when they're wrapping up a video, send viewers from their broadcast over to another broadcaster, which is pretty unreal. So you're building numbers out of nowhere, right? You can be ready to wrap up a broadcast or whatever, and then out of nowhere you get an extra 2,000 people watching the video, right? It's so on that front, it's kind of interesting to see that side of things happening. But to your point, on the advertising front, it is becoming a little bit busier in terms of the volume of what we're working with. But I think it's obviously, we'll see how it ends up kind of developing over time once things start to go back to whatever the new normal is, right? But yeah, obviously taking the good with the bad for sure. There's plenty of positive things about this.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think that's also just a trend that we've noticed over the years is volume, just in and of itself, right? I mean, in the days of printing CDs and pressing vinyl, there was only limited quantities of that kind of thing, where now anyone, like I said before, can upload a song to Spotify or to the DSPs and have a shot at it. So with that, there's obviously a domino effect with marketing managers and marketing experts like us of, the volume gets bigger, and then when a pandemic hits, it's digital everything. So it's just really interesting to see how volume paired with a pandemic has really changed the dynamic of the industry. And to Devon, to your point, it's going to be really interesting when things get back to our new normal of getting back on the road, what that's going to look like. And it's going to be really interesting, but it's also a very exciting time to be in the music industry, I think. Definitely more accessible than from when I'm sure all of us entered the industry. So there's just more information. There's, you have easier access to some of these platforms, and you're able to get that insight into, what you need and what is required to do your digital marketing, to, put your song out there and get it supported, and all the tools and kind of key to information that, we didn't have before. So this was a really great talk. Thank you both so much. If you have any final thoughts, jump in.
I think that was great. I appreciate you having me on, and I think there were some great questions. And I'm also very excited to see, how things progress moving forward. Obviously, I think I speak for all of us. Can't wait to go to a live show again.
I know.
So looking forward to that and getting back to that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for having me too. It's great to again meet you both and go over these. I mean, this is a learning opportunity for me too, touching on some new stuff that may not have been necessarily familiar with before. But
well, it's been a pleasure, and I'm so excited to see you both at a show, hopefully soon. And we'll cheers to the pandemic being over, and hopefully some great successes to look forward to. So thanks so much.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you.